मेरा नाम है तैमूर अब्बास और हम हैं एसटी इन्फ्लुएंसर्स। थिंक ग्लोबल के प्लेटफॉर्म से हम लेकर आते हैं ऐसे लोगों को जिन्होंने जिंदगी के मुख्तलिफ शोबों में खूब नाम कमाया है और अब वो दुनिया भर में पाकिस्तान का नाम रोशन कर रहे हैं। उन लोगों की जिंदगी से मिलते हैं हमें सीखने के बहुत सारे मौके।
अगर आप चाहते हैं इस कीमती मालूमात से फ़ायदा उठाना तो लाजमी तौर पर हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें, अपनी पसंदीदा वीडियोस को लाइक करें और शेयर करें अपने फ्रेंड्स और फैमिली के साथ।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम व्यूअर्स, मैं हूं आपका होस्ट तैमूर अब्बास और हमेशा की तरह आज फिर एक बार हम आपके लिए लेके आए हैं एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग सेशन। और आज हम बात करेंगे यूक्रेन के बारे में। यूक्रेन का थोड़ा सा बताता चलूं कि यूक्रेन एक वन ऑफ द अनएक्सप्लोर्ड कंट्रीज़ है, क्योंकि एशियन कंट्रीज़ के अंदर जब हम बात करते हैं स्टूडेंट्स के फॉरेन में एजुकेशन लेनी है तो बहुत कह लें कि ज़्यादातर लोग इंग्लिश स्पीकिंग कंट्रीज़ को प्रेफर करते हैं। उसमें हो सकता है इंग्लैंड, अमेरिका, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, कनाडा, ये प्रेफर्ड चॉइसेस होती हैं। और उसके बाद फिर हमारी दूसरी चॉइस होती है यूरोपियन कंट्रीज़। लेकिन उसके अलावा भी हमारे पास काफ़ी सारी चॉइसेस हैं और हम चाह रहे हैं कि हम आपको उनके बारे में भी थोड़ी सी आगाही दें कि वहाँ पर कौन कौन से सब्जेक्ट्स में आप एजुकेशन ले सकते हैं, कितना आसान है वहाँ पर रहना, क्या एक्सपेंसेस हैं। तो उसके लिए हमने आज एक बहुत ही स्पेशल मेहमान को इनवाइट किया है, बिकॉज वो यूक्रेन से हैं। तो आज का सेशन हम इंग्लिश में करेंगे। सो लेट मी स्विच टू इंग्लिश फॉर टुडेज सेशन, just because we have a very special guest with us. And I'm very thankful to her. Before I introduce that, she has taken time out of her weekend and agreed to speak to us. And she's a very good friend, a very kind person, and a very experienced professional. If you speak of multinational companies like different NGOs, she has worked as analyst. She's also working as a freelancer. And I mean, it's a long list of things. So I would rather wait for her to introduce and share with us. So I would like to add Lesia to our stream. So welcome, Lesia.
Hello. Thank you for having me here. I'm very like flattered and stuff. So yeah, you've introduced me a little bit. My name is Lesia and I'm from Ukraine. I'm from the city of Kiev, which is the capital. So I'm just gonna briefly tell a little bit about myself. And yeah, as you said, I'm an analyst and like I'm also a jack of all trades a little bit. So like, you know, I do translations. I like, well, what not? I used to write project proposal applications and stuff like that. So yes, right now I'm in Sweden actually. So I'm in Malmo. But a lot of time, I also like spend a lot of time in Kiev, and I used to study at Lund University, the same university as you did, which is like a great place. And I like, you know, I kind of miss it, but you know, you have to work and stuff like that. And yeah, so I worked as a journalist. I also like worked as an analyst and as grant manager. So I have like, you know, plenty of experience, and I do want to shed some light on Ukraine. So I think we'll start with that, right? With the country. Yeah. So I would say that like, you know, Ukraine is an amazing place. It is an amazing place. I know it's like, you know, there are lots of misconceptions, prejudices, stereotypes regarding it. But in fact, it's a very like, you know, European country. And it's also like a very vibrant country. Like, you know, it's like, if you come around, probably like people will like, you know, associate all the bad things with it, especially because there is like an ongoing war in Eastern Ukraine, but like, it's far away from the main towns that are located like, you know, because Ukraine is big, it's probably larger than France. So like, you know, don't worry, like the country is safe. And it's a very vibrant country. So like, you know, if you come around, you'll see like skyscrapers. At times you will like even think that you're in New York or something, which is kind of fair because Ukraine has this like, you know, whatever, this American allure to it slightly. Like, you know, we have all like everything's open like 24/7, one-stop shop kind of culture. Like, you know, there are like lots of big malls, like lots of entertainment going on. There's always something going on. It's like it's a very vibrant country.
Yeah.
And I think it's like its main asset are the people. That is like the people are very genuine, and they do, like, you know, they are actually smiling because they want to smile. They laugh because they want to laugh. They're angry because they're angry. Like, you know, they don't do it to sort of flatter somebody, or like this little bit of you know, this culture of having a smile on your face for no reason. I personally find it to be a little bit annoying. So yeah, so those like are the great things about Ukraine. And the major cities include Kiev, the capital, Lviv, which is western Ukraine, Odessa, which is southern Ukraine, and Kharkiv, which is eastern Ukraine. And I do.
No, I mean, one thing I was wanted to just add to it, that I mean, you have told us a lot of things that many of us didn't know. For instance, like how the life is or the city is, and this is very interesting. For example, some of the things that we share, like we went to the same university, or we came from abroad and now living in Sweden. So we know like a bit of both sides for our countries and for Sweden. So and now what you are saying, I think, I mean, it's wonderful. Like a lot of things that we miss in Sweden. So that is also a fact. So coming to the, I mean, you were mentioning some cities. Maybe you could add something about which universities are there and which are the most popular ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are like a couple of universities in Ukraine that are quite well known. And they include Kiev Taras Shevchenko University. That's like one of the biggest ones, that I'm an alumna of it. So yeah, I used to study political science there. I did my bachelor's degree there, basically.
Okay.
And also, it's like Kiev Mohila School. It's also located in Kiev, and it's quite well known. And but these universities, they offer like different courses, including for foreigners. So I did my research prior to this program, because obviously I didn't know that much about how. I mean, I've seen foreigners in Ukraine studying, but I didn't really know like all the details and so on. And these are like, you know, the big ones. And there's also Kyiv Polytechnical University. So it's like everything math related. And it's a huge one, and I think it's extremely well known because its graduates basically are in high demand. Because like, you know, we have like a lot of mathematical studies that are quite good, even like, you know, well, on a global level. Then there is this University, so that's medical studies, and it also, like, you know, you can come around to study there. And in Kharkiv, there is a medical university. In Odessa, there is a medical university, and they do offer courses for foreigners. I mean, I've checked all of this, so like I'm quite confident this is the case. Then there is a very like specialized university in Ukraine called Concordia. So it offers actually like business administration courses, and not like a business administration course, it's like a master's degree, bachelor's and master's degree. And all of the studies are in English. So like, I mean, it's a kind of like, you know, it's a university. And yeah, so these are like, you know, the major hubs are Odessa, but I'm not so sure about Lviv, to be honest, because I tried to find some kind of information, and to be honest, I failed when it comes to foreigners, whether they like accept foreigners, because there is like a huge university in Lviv. It's also a national one. So I mean, if like people want more information on that, they can always reach out to me. I'll ask somebody about that.
And I think what would be best, that we will add links to those universities that Lesia is just mentioning. So I mean, because I mean, now when in the discussion, it's a fair chance that maybe people could miss it, but in the description we will add these links, so you can go to it and check yourself what universities are there and what do they offer. So I mean, you mentioned one of your universities where you went. So just to give an idea to our viewers, how often you were meeting foreigners when you were studying?
Good question. So I think that those foreigners who come around to study in Ukraine, they take very specialized courses. So it's usually not social science. And because, well, quite frankly, nobody needs social science that much. People come around to study math or like biology or whatever, like these kind of studies. So I didn't see them that much. I did see like some Azerbaijanese people coming around. Yeah, that's for sure. And I even like, had a couple of classes with them. So that's what I remember. And but I've seen them like actually on the streets, like the foreigners, like the students. So it's very easy to tell whether this is a student or not. And so as I said, the majority of foreigners who come around to Ukraine, they like take very specialized courses. So unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to communicate with them that much.
So now you just mentioned specialized courses. We could just look into it, because what I know, or I did some research, and what I found, a lot of people go to Ukraine firstly for medicine, like to study health sciences, and many other go to study avionics. Like you have one of the best universities or departments teaching how to make airplanes, how to control, so a lot about avionics. So if you could name a couple of places, whether, of course, the Kyiv might be the best one to go to, and then if it is Odessa as well. So what is your view about it, and which subjects?
Which subjects I would recommend?
And like, I mean, if my observation is correct, like if it is medicine, avionics, or there are more subjects to it?
Well, I would say that, these are like the main ones. So because back in the Soviet Union, foreign students used to come around and study it. So like, I think they are still popular with that group of people. But I think that there's also like a slight shift going on, because Ukraine now introduced quite a few courses in English, social science, which pertain to social sciences, and business administration, so economy, social science, things like that. And as I mentioned, like this university, Concordia is one of them, and Kyiv Mohila School is also quite powerful in this regard. And what's good about all of these universities is that they also they have strong ties with European ones. So it's possible to there are foreign teachers coming around and stuff like that. And also it's possible to travel to the EU, but that's that's a bit tricky probably, because I mean, sure, it's possible, but if you are a foreigner, and because right now Ukrainians, they don't need a visa to go to the EU, but the majority of people from other countries, they do need a visa, so there will be slight hassle regarding that. Yeah, and but yeah, they do enjoy strong partnerships. So I would say that avionics and medical studies and math are popular, but they're new. There are new options out there. So I would recommend checking that out as well, because relatively well, Ukraine is cheap. So let's be honest, right? So
we'll go to that exactly.
Huh?
We will go to that aspect.
I would say that check out those kind of studies as well. I mean, there's a lot to offer, to be honest.
I agree. And if you could share something about the admission process. So of course you were national. For you, things must have been very easy and very different. But for the people coming from abroad, if you know anything about the admission process.
Yeah, so I did my research and I consulted with some people, because I wasn't sure about this. Ukrainian visa system is relatively complex, to be honest. So it's like, I work with migration issues, and I know that even like for the purpose of traveling for tourist purposes, it's a little bit tricky for some countries, because in some of the cases you're actually like, there is this electronic visa, and then there's like a physical visa, and like I don't even know, it's quite complex. So I decided to do my research, and what happens is that in order to study in Ukraine, more or less, the system works like that. So you need to reach out to the university first, to whichever university you want to study in, and you reach out to them. And if you're fit, basically, if they think that you can, like, it's okay for you to study in Ukraine, because probably they do take into account like whatever merits and diplomas and stuff. So you cannot just like come around like randomly. And and then they issue a letter of support, and then you need to turn to the Ukrainian embassy. So you need you need to turn to the Ukrainian embassy and apply for a student visa, a D visa. But they're like, as I said, because Ukrainian visa system is quite complex, and let's be honest, reaching out to whichever governmental agencies in Ukraine and expecting good English or even whichever English is, it's a bit too optimistic. So that's why there are lots of intermediaries working in that sector. So you can always if you do choose to study in Ukraine, I can push you through to some people who can easily fix all of that, because as I said, like bureaucracy, red tape, and English, it's tricky in Ukraine.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, if people reach out to us, definitely we can ask you how to proceed, and definitely there can be ways. So like one thing you just mentioned is the language. So in the schools, what language is the medium of instruction? Is it Ukrainian, or are there courses in English as well?
So in Ukraine, the state language is Ukrainian. Accordingly, all of the studies are in Ukrainian. However, yes, there are international programs in English. So Kyiv Mohyla offers one, that's for sure. Like there are a couple of options. Concordia University, I mean, it's like, there's this program which is in English only. So that one is quite popular. So it's not too common. And Medical University, by the way, also has courses in English. I checked it. Bogomolets University has courses in English. Yet, as I said, regrettably, in Ukraine, English is very weak. So, don't expect to come around, and don't expect people to be on the same level as I am. let's be honest. It's an exception, and regular people don't speak English, or their English is very poor. So if you if you pop to a shop and expect the kind of Swedish response in English, because in Sweden, the majority of people speak English.
Of course.
And quite good. Their English is quite good as well. So don't expect shop assistants or somebody else to reply in English. They'd be like, what are you saying? And so sure. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is about Russian. So a lot of people think that Ukrainians speak Russian, and they do. And in regular or in everyday life, they do. But it also depends on the region a little bit. And so in Western Ukraine, they predominantly speak Ukrainian. And in Eastern, Southeastern Ukraine, and South in general, there's Russian-speaking parts, even though it's not the state language. But in everyday life, we speak Russian a lot. So I speak Russian mostly, but for professional purposes, I use it Ukrainian mostly. And it's just the way it is. It's because we've been connected with Russia for hundreds of years, whether we like it or not. It's just like, sort of the same. I mean, you speak English, but that's only because the UK colonized
Exactly.
Pakistan at some point of your history. So like, you just need to come to terms with it. And
Yeah, I mean, professionally or in education, it's like a second language to many South Asian countries, English.
Yeah. So like, as I said, though, Ukraine, like, it tries to push this nationalist agenda nowadays, which is good. Yet it remains like, it remains a live fact that people speak Russian a lot. So it hasn't, like, faded. So,
Yeah,
but I would recommend everyone, like, those people who want to come around to Ukraine to study, to obviously try and study the languages as well, because because I mean, it's gonna come in handy. Let's put it this way. So it's gonna be useful, and so that's the language situation in Ukraine.
Exactly. And I think we can summarize it like this. No matter whether the course is in English or Ukrainian, I think Ukrainian is one of the must do thing if you are going there to study. So sooner or later you have to study, which is quite a good thing that you can learn another additional language.
Yeah, and plus they offer courses at the university. So they offer courses, Ukrainian courses, I think even Russian courses maybe, but I'm not so sure about that. But Ukrainian ones for sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's and I've noticed that a lot of, like, foreigners who come around and study in Ukraine, they don't have such a hard time learning language that much. Maybe because I'm actually thinking about, like, the Turks. Because the Turks, they pick up the language pretty fast. Perhaps there is, like, a certain similarity, and I don't know why. Because like, other nations are not that good. So like, maybe because it's also, like, this attitude, they're kind of laid back, and it's like they're not afraid of making mistakes or stuff. So, like, even though they're Ukrainian or Russian, it might be sucky, they don't care. They still, like, communicate. And they don't have this whatever perfection in mind.
That's a good to know. So coming to the, I mean, you have explained admission process briefly, and the visa is tough. Yes, we know, and the language is mainly Ukrainian. So this is so far the summary. Now going to the fee structure, because this is one of the things where Ukraine wins from many other European countries, because you have to pay lots of huge sum in fee. So how is it in Ukraine?
So as I said, Ukraine is cheap, and like, for example, to give you a taste of how cheap it is, like, you can, like, grab a cab in Kiev, that's the capital, right? For €2. A ride might cost €2 or €3, stuff like that. And in Sweden, I think the bus is more expensive than taxis.
Way more expensive, yeah.
Than taxis are in Kiev. And I think it's even cheaper in other, like, cities, but I'm not so sure. So don't quote me on that one. And so when it comes to fees, obviously they are much lower than everywhere in the EU, to the best of my knowledge, at least. Because when, for example, when I applied for studies in Sweden, they told me that the cost of it is 20k euros for 2 years. Something like that. I mean, I was glad that I also landed a scholarship, but 20k is a lot, and that's just one part of the game. The other part is that, like, the migration office asks you to show, like, a certain sum in advance, unless you get a scholarship from the Swedish Institute. And so be prepared to spend a lot of money, and then it's gonna be expensive. So Ukraine in this regard is, like, stands out. You can study for 2.54k of dollars per year. something like that. The range is between so it's much cheaper, obviously. And and I don't know about like the financial policy when it comes to migration, because as I said, in Sweden you need to show the sum on your account in advance. And I don't know whether it's like that in Ukraine. So if you need that type of information, you can also, can you compare? Okay, Ukrainian.
So, like while we are speaking of comparing Sweden and Ukrainian fee, someone has asked that can you compare education opportunities between Sweden and Ukraine?
So sure, I can. I mean, to a very to a very small extent, though. And the opportunities, like in terms of what, like money opportunities, like how costly is it? Or
we can put it in two ways. The education quality, and then let's say that the amount of money that we pay.
Okay, so education quality, I would say, so this is a very debatable area, because I'm gonna like I have a strong opinion when it comes to that. So Ukraine, in my opinion, has its advantages compared to Sweden in terms of like because if you like take up any kind of studies, you will be most likely like introduced to a wide range of topics, especially when you're a freshman. So it's like, they're gonna give you courses about logic, philosophy, whatnot. So that's like, so, and I think it's good actually, because I think that like, whatever you study, it doesn't really matter what you study, because there are certain things which are universal when it comes to everything. And you need to get like, to understand the connections between certain things, right? So this is something which is really good. But then there is this huge other disadvantage in Ukraine, because at some point you realize that the education system is way too rigid. So like, you're very like, you're dependent on personas and certain personas within the educational system. Like, oh, this professor, there's this professor, he's so clever. He like, you can't have any kind of conversation with him, debates, nothing of that kind, because he's a smart ass and you're dumb. Okay. It's like, okay, then why am I studying here? It's like, what's the point? What's the point? Yeah, so this is the worst part about Ukrainian educational system, is that you cannot have a proper conversation with the professors, because they think that they are the best. The best. And here's my book, it's the Bible, and you need to quote everything I like say. Like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense. And the other like disadvantage is methodology. So you're not encouraged, and this is true. You are not encouraged to carry out research as a student because you suck. That's the way they put it. If I like, I'm gonna be like super blunt here. Like, you suck, you're stupid. Like, write whatever kind of paper and just get out of this university. And you're like, okay. Like,
But I think here we can have one more thing that into perspective, that quite often this is a very common situation in many, I would say, let's say, developing countries, or countries where the innovation is not has not been so high, and that is one of the reason that is driving innovation backward. But on the other hand, what I feel good in all of this is that you get some pressure, especially when you're in the bachelor studies, you get some pressure, and they force you to learn something additional the way they think. And that really helps you when we come to countries like Sweden, Denmark, or UK or US, where they are relying on technological innovation. I mean, their economy relies, the major part is relying on it. Then these students coming from our background, they often perform much better because they are coming from a tough environment, and when they get a chance to groom, they really do well. That's what I have experienced.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you here. Because as I said, it's both advantage and a disadvantage. So like when I came around to study in Sweden, I saw the flip side, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, I still remember this conversation with a professor, with a political scientist, right, about electoral systems. And I was talking to him and it felt like he had no idea what I was talking about. He even sort of admitted it. That like, oh, I'm not that, like, you know, I'm not that much into electoral
They're
systems.
very humble.
Not be that much of into electoral systems. You're a political scientist. What kind of conclusions can you make? Because if you study one thing only, you won't be able to put that one thing into perspective if you don't know anything about anything else. So like, you know, narrow-mindedness is a disadvantage, in my opinion, when it comes to studying abroad in in Sweden as well. I don't know about the US, I don't know about the UK, I'm not so sure. But what I saw is that, like in Sweden, like some of the things that were so obvious to me, and it's just because I studied, right? They were not that obvious to others. They were like, you know, like I had this feeling as though I came around to teach them, and instead of them teaching me. And I was like, I'm flattered, but come on, all of this is costly. It's not like it's free. So so I was like a little bit shocked, but there is an advantage to this as well. So in Sweden, the kind of experience I had is that obviously you're encouraged to do a lot yourself. So you can express whichever opinions you want. Oh, well, that actually I'm gonna comment. Yeah, you're encouraged to express your whatever educational opinions, but you're not that. Yeah, but you're not that encouraged to challenge any kind of, like, you know, tolerant agenda going on. So I had this very like negative experience actually in this regard, that when I came around and, like, you know, I wanted to have a proper conversation with people, like especially with my Swedish classmates, and, like, you know, I contested some of the mantras like are currently in vogue, like, oh, like, I know women's need quotas and women need quotas and stuff like that. I contested it because I have a different opinion.
Yeah.
And I remember I actually said that, like, you know, you shouldn't. So my line was that I don't believe that like you just need to randomly, like, take women and put them into positions, because positions are merit based. And this is what I believe in. It's not because I don't like women. I'm a woman myself, and I'm making, like, you know, I'm trying to make a living here, right? Stuff like that. But I don't believe in the quota system. It's my opinion. It's okay to disagree. We can have a conversation about it. Maybe we're gonna find out more about each other. And I remember when I said it, my classmates were like so disgusted that they were like, you know, they didn't even want to talk to me that much. And I'm like, oh, that's welcoming. Thank you. Thank you. So this is like, so this is in terms of cultures, this is something different. And I wasn't impressed by that at all. And
I mean, what I want to add to this, that we had this discussion before, right? That I mean, here you can agree or disagree, but between certain limits. So if you are challenging those limits, then you're not welcome.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it. So if you are agreeing or disagreeing within those limits, then you are fine.
Yeah. I totally agree. So you kind of, like, you know, you should, I don't know, it just feels as though you are, you will be basically ostracized and marginalized if you start contesting some of the things which they believe are currently in vogue and undebatable. Well, it doesn't work like that. regrettably. I mean, sure, it's great to I'm quite open-minded, I believe, and I communicate with everyone, regardless of race, sex, or something else. But yeah, I have opinions, and I want to express them. If you're not okay with that, well, okay, well, that's not very democratic in my view, So I'm not sure about other countries though. So I don't think it's that way in the UK, for example, or in the US. I'm not so sure.
I mean, we can summarize it. What you said between Ukraine and Swedish education, just for our viewers, that I mean, there are very good things for Ukrainian education system. For example, their excellence in subjects like mathematics, health, and a lot of other subjects, their excellence. But you find other challenges because the structure is more rigid. So that is where you need to cope up with. Although the fees is very low, so that is another plus.
Yeah.
Coming to Sweden, I mean, I just summarized this, that coming to Sweden, the fee is high. The education system is much more flexible, and of course the excellence is there. But where Ukraine really wins is for the people who are coming from the developing or poor countries who do not afford to pay like 20 or 30,000 euros for 2 years. Then the Ukraine is one of the best countries for them to come and study and have really a quality education.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely, you summarized it very well. And I would just add that one other advantage in Sweden that I saw was pertain to methodology, because as I said, you are encouraged to study methodology in the sense that you are actually encouraged to carry out research as well according to methodology, and that is very important because in Ukraine, when it comes to social sciences, especially, I mean, I can only judge this realm based on my experience at the Kyiv University. So we were not encouraged to do any research. So our bachelor thesis were like basically copying what others said, a summary of what others said, and that's not very cool in my opinion. So I had to, when I came around to Sweden and actually realized that, there's methodology out there, and you need to learn it, and you can't just copy what others said. It was like amazing. I didn't know. I'm obviously being a little bit sarcastic here, but my point is that it was like I was a bit of a blank canvas when I was in Sweden in that regard. I had to study all this qualitative, quantitative methodology and stuff like that, because I just didn't know anything. And that, so it was as simple as that. So I had to learn all of that. Well, hopefully I did, but you never know. And so this is something that I'm not impressed about when it comes to Ukrainian education. But as I said, again, there are advantages, disadvantages. I mean, if you are a student, you can also even if you come around to Ukraine and you study and blah, 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 you can always study methodology yourself. So it's your, it might be your private decision to do that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's necessary, because I understand that a lot of people are super put off by words like qualitative, quantitative methodology, but it actually matters. It actually matters, and it matters a lot, because
I mean, it is the base. It is the base that we are touching here, like quantitative, qualitative. That is something that is the base of the whole education system. And then when we move to the research, then we go to the empirical or analytical. So that's another domain then we get into. I think this is really nice that you have explained in this way, and you have really added to some of the key aspects. Another one aspect that I feel that is most important for many people from developing countries is the financial aspect. And coming to financial aspect, I think we can look at two more questions for that. One is that whether there are any scholarships that the students can avail. So we go to that question first, and then the second question we go to is that whether the students could work during studies. Like, for example, maybe it is not easy to find work at all. So if you could combine these two questions.
Okay, so I have bad news for you. There are no scholarships.
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, there are no scholarships because it doesn't make sense for Ukraine to offer scholarships. It's not a rich country. So, yeah, I mean, even Ukrainian students are like paying for education, even though we like on paper it's free, but reality is different. So like we pay for our education, and I've never heard about any kinds of scholarships, regrettably. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to study in Ukraine, you will have to save up at least what, 10K, something like that, maybe less, depending on what program you choose, and for how many years, obviously. Yeah. And yeah, so that's one thing. And the other thing is your question was about jobs. The job. So a student visa doesn't allow foreign students to work in Ukraine. So you have to apply for a work permit separately. And yeah, I think, okay, so here's the deal. I don't know, but I can check if somebody needs that, whether you can apply for the work permit in Ukraine. Like, you know, because in Sweden, for example, the migration system works this way, that if you want to apply, I mean, the student permit gives you the right to work in Sweden. Yeah. So that I know. And but it's extremely difficult to land a job in Sweden. There is always some kind of a pitfall awaiting you. And I think that in Ukraine it's relatively easier to find a job, because a lot of Ukrainians, regrettably, due to economic circumstances and stuff like that, they go to work abroad. Yeah, they move abroad, and as a result, we have a shortage of workforce. So I think that it's relatively easy to land a job, but obviously you need to know Ukrainian for that. And or Russian, or I don't know, speak some kind of language that people speak, and yeah, so you can do that. And to sort of like explain, like salary wise, don't expect a high salary. Yeah. So this might so this is like, you know, it obviously depends on what you study. So like if my recommendation is not to study social sciences. It's just social sciences are not very lucrative. So it seems. So I'm just gonna say that like Ukraine has to offer in terms of like, you know, job wise, it has IT in a booming IT sector. Yeah. And the salaries are pretty high. So there's if you are a senior developer, so I've heard, you can make around $6,000 in Kiev, and that's a huge amount of money. In Kiev, this is a huge amount of money. It's like you're gonna be king and stuff like that. But obviously, this is like an outlier, an exception. But there are people in Ukraine, Ukrainians with diplomas from this Kyiv Polytechnic University and some other universities as well, who do make that amount of money. And they are like, you know, they're pretty picky, so I heard as well. They're like, oh, you're like, you know, I'm not gonna accept this salary, which is 5K. No, because they are in huge demand. US and all the other countries are like, you know, they are unable to fill those positions, so they ask them a lot of times, and there are these huge companies like Cyclum and others. So like, you know, there's a lot of innovation going on in Ukraine in that domain. And I'm pretty sure that if you study well and you become a programmer, a C developer, well, you won't have a hard time.
I mean, I can add one thing to that is, a lot of European automotive companies are now developing their R&D, not let's say R&D, but development centers in eastern part of Europe. That includes Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and in those countries, because the workforce is relatively cheaper. So then they get basically a quality resource just at their doorstep, and they don't have to travel to India, China, Pakistan, or other countries because they are far away. So in a situation like this pandemic, when you cannot travel or for other reasons, I mean, it's always best to have your resources closer to you. And for EU EEA agreement, there are other benefits as well.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I mean, what you just said, it really makes sense, because then lots of companies are opening their offices, and when they need experienced resources, then it is quite justifiable salaries. And that's a good news for engineers and IT professionals, that if they study in Ukraine, they learn the language, the chances are quite high that they may end up in one of those jobs if they have previous experiences as well.
Yeah, definitely. So that's something very enticing about Ukraine. And plus, you do have to also take into account that, as you said, geography. So some of your viewers might not even know where Ukraine is. So I wouldn't be surprised. I once heard from a woman who was from the UK that she thought that Ukraine was somewhere in Siberia. I'm like, cool. And Siberia is a little bit far away, let's mildly put. And Ukraine borders with EU member states. So that is Poland, Slovakia, Hungary. And so it's basically right next to it is right next to the EU. So yeah. So, I mean, there are lots of flights in Kiev which are cheap. So you can I mean, if you have a Schengen visa, then there's not a problem to purchase a ticket to whatever, Germany or Poland or even Denmark. I'm flying tomorrow, so it's to Kiev from Denmark, and it's what costs 70 euros, like 8 euros the ticket. But this is even I would say expensive. Usually it's a little bit cheaper. And so there are lots of low cost shuttles, buses, whatnot. So that's something enticing about Ukraine as well. So that it's close and it's cheap and it's still European. So I mean, we have Soviet architecture left.
So
but that's fine because there are lots of Kiev, for example, is such a bustling city. I mean, there's so many skyscrapers, as I said in the beginning. It feels sometimes as though you are not actually in Kiev. This didn't used to be like that. Trust me. I remember Kiev was quite it was always beautiful, especially since I was born there. So it's always beautiful for me. But it used to be a bit more dull. Now it's something entirely different.
So one let's say last question, because we are heading close to our time, but one last question, and that is something that you have quite a lot of experience, is cross-border mobility within EU. And because that's what your work is about.
Yes.
So if you could just mention how long it takes for people, if they are studying there, they start to live or work there. Is it possible that they become citizens in Ukraine, and how long it would take, if you can share? Maybe you don't know the details, but that is something we can add later to our description.
Okay, let's put it this way. Ukrainian migration law, just like its visa policy toward other nations, is complex. I would say that it's not easy to get a citizenship. So one way of doing it, obviously, is if you have a Ukrainian partner, you can get a permit to live there and to live in Ukraine, and which is, probably it makes you eligible, but over time, over a certain period of time. And I think, don't quote me on this one, it's about 5 years. Yeah, but I'm not sure. I mean, if somebody needs that information, I'll gladly provide it like privately. But I'm not so sure. I do the thing about Ukrainian. I mean, the thing is that I deal with migration, but I don't deal with Ukrainian like legal system in that sense. So it's not really like, not really something I heed that much. I mostly like heed migration processes, but that's something different.
Yeah, and also there is another aspect that you are often talking about, from Ukraine to EU. That's another, like, that's main work domain for your NGO. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I can be clear about is that Ukrainian permit does not give you the right to travel without visa to EU. So no, that is out of the question. You will have to apply separately for Schengen visas and stuff like that. And one other thing about migration is, well, as I said, if you have like a Ukrainian partner, but this has to be like, you have to be officially registered, so you have to be married, because in Sweden it doesn't matter. You might be married, you might not be married. It's up to you, like, but in Ukraine, you have to be officially registered and married, and only then you can apply for a permit. And if successful, you will also get access to its tax system, which is quite advantageous. So for those of you who don't know, probably that nobody knows. So Ukrainian tax system is very favorable in the sense of, well, some of the taxes are ridiculously low. So they're borderline non-existent. I'm a private entrepreneur in Ukraine. And so it takes like a day to register private entrepreneurship. And then what you get, like, if you can also like apply for like a simplified whatever tax system, and I don't know what it's called, but that doesn't really matter. So the point here is that, like, if you don't earn over a certain amount of money, you will pay as low as 5% of the income, and there will also like be whatever social contribution, but it's also quite low. So it's like something like 100 euros every 3 months or so. So in this sense, Ukraine is extremely beneficial, and I know this for a fact, that a lot of foreigners, even including like EU nationals, are actually moving to Ukraine for this purpose. So, because taxes in the EU and in Sweden, for example, are extremely high. And there is no incentive to earn more than, for example, 5K or 5.5, because the tax is progressive, right? It's not a flat rate. And the tax is progressive, and you'll be paying as much as 50% of your income if you earn, right, more than a certain amount of money. And that's not something that is very cool. So I'm sure, you have like free healthcare and stuff like that, but it also depends on what your priorities in life is, because obviously in Ukraine, if you do land a good job and you pay like 5%, well, what's stopping you from going to a private doctor? Nothing. So in this regard, Ukraine is very enticing, because the quality of life at the very end might actually be higher for you, not for everybody, obviously. But for you, like, sure, for a person who earns a certain amount of money.
Thank you, Lesia. Thank you. This is so insightful, and it has been very entertaining in a sense that you have been very lively. So I think it was a very good session. We got some insight, some goods and the bads, and I'm glad that they're not so much uglies. So I mean, it's still good and bad. And that's really good that we can get some quality education for lower amount of money. And there are some prospects in some domains where we could get some nice jobs with a good salary. So of course there are always challenges, and what we wanted to convey today to our viewers is the exact situation. We don't want to get them into some false hopes. So I think this was really wonderful that you put all the situation as it is. And just for the viewers, we will add some links to our description. If you have any questions later on, please drop in the description as a comment. And we would really like to have your feedback and hear what you think about. And I will definitely also add some photos later on of Ukraine, so you can just picture. And of course you can always Google. That's another possibility. So once again, I would like to thank you, Lesia. I know you have been very busy these days, and it was very nice that you took time and you came to talk to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I also learned a lot myself. now I'm like, now that I did the research, well, I've become even more of a pundit, which is cool. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for watching, and until next time, bye.
Bye.